This is being recorded for posterity. I mean, you and I are practically dead at this point.
Well, if not now, then after 4 years of Hillary Clinton, we probably will be.
Quite possibly.
No, she probably won't start the death camps until well into her second term.
Well, I mean, she didn't talk about war anywhere in here. She just sort of made offhanded.
Sure, yes,
she made offhanded comments about America leading.
Combating terrorism. No. Combating terrorism and keeping the homeland safe. It's not enough to contain ISIS. We have to.
Oh yeah, that
defeat
was the second one. Okay.
Yeah, that was number 2. Number 2 is war, more war. What is it good for? My pocketbook.
Well, my point was she didn't talk about stopping it anywhere.
Stopping war? No, she says we have to defeat ISIS. Or she didn't talk about stopping war. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she's an absolute hawk. She is pro-war. She has not seen a war that she wasn't willing to vote for, had she the opportunity.
So did I read right the other day? Hey, that's a good term, read right. I feel like I just programmed something. Did I read it right that Obama's the first president, his entire presidency, we were at war?
It depends. I think it depends on how narrowly you define war. I think that even before 9/11, we were still in some sort of state of emergency, even under Bush. And I think that state of emergency was going on for a significant chunk of Clinton's. And Bush won. I think we were probably in some sort of Middle East crisis for that whole 4 years.
Because I wasn't sure how they were like, was it like declared war or?
Well, no, we haven't declared a war since World War II. Pretty sure. Is it that one, or I don't think we ever declared Korea. So no, I mean.
So we've just been bombing. Well, if we go by how long we've been bombing people, haven't we been doing that since like the 1980s?
Yes. Well, I mean, it depends. Right. It depends on. Look. American foreign policy has been largely belligerent for the last several decades, and whether we are technically bombing people right now or not. The fact is that people are making plans to bomb people soon if we aren't bombing them now. The fact that there is a ceasefire does not mean that the war is over.
No, I see what you're saying, but
I mean, it's one of those things where, I was listening to Tom Woods the other day, and he mentioned that for his first term, George W. Bush campaigned on a very humble foreign policy, and then 9/11 happened, and after that it was foreign, and it's questionable as to how honest he was being about that, because his vice president was Cheney, and there's at least from what I understand, there's fairly decent evidence that the plan for for engaging in war in the Middle East was at least fairly well concluded as, we should do this, it will help us politically, kind of thing. The fact that they got 9/11 to enable them to do that doesn't necessarily mean that it wouldn't have happened without 9/11. But the point is that in 2000 we George W. won on campaigning on a fairly humble foreign policy, even if that wasn't what his actual intention was. I would say that by that statement, again, it depends on how you want to define war, right? Because if Bush was campaigning on a humble foreign policy, but secretly planning to bomb somewhere, then that's not really any better than that's not really any better an example of not at war than when Obama was drawing back Afghanistan troops, right?
Yeah.
Just to be completely fair, right? Yeah. And by the
we
same
can do
token,
that. We're not playing sides.
Right.
It's almost one of them. I feel good playing principle rather than side, don't you?
I mean, generally, yeah. I mean, I don't have a favorite sports team. By the same token, if I watch sports, it's to see interesting things happen and watch the players play. And
I don't know if that's the best way to put it, though, because I'll be fair on that. I'll play by principle when it comes to economics and politics. But if I was watching, I don't watch sports, but if I did, I would almost certainly have a team that I root for. The fact that people do that people that have
but would you have a team that you root for, and then but like, let's say hypothetically that you had a team that you chose to root for, and then the composition of that team changed completely. Would you reconsider rooting for that team?
Okay, I'll put it like this. If I had been a Lions fan 10 years ago, I would not be a Lions fan now. I would be supporting a different team. So, yes, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all of those.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
we didn't really go into depth with them like we did with Bernie Sanders, but there were just so many of them, and half of them were his anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a big page of diarrhea.
Yeah.
I mean, we already covered most, and the worst part is that we already covered about half of these with Bernie Sanders bullshit.
Yeah.
So, that's also scary, right? In the sense that her platform was that strongly influenced by Sanders. That makes her worse, right? Because he's a socialist, and that way lays gulags. But I'm sure it'll be fine.
And like you said, she's a hawk.
That doesn't help.
I know. I wasn't trying to help. I was adding to the horrifying mix.
I know, but I was hoping that you would come forward with some kind of shining ray of light.
Oh,
as opposed to the.
Hang on, I think I've got one. Okay, so.
Okay.
If it gets really bad, they'll kill us, and we won't have to think about this anymore.
I guess that's true.
That's a shining ray of light, right?
It depends on whether you believe in an afterlife and justice.
All right, how's this? She might end up dragging us into a war with Russia so quickly that the rest of these problems become almost irrelevant.
Yeah. The reset button was to bring us back to the Cold War. That's what we fucking need.
Am I the only one that sees that? By the way, like
sees what?
It's okay. Like you were saying before, like maybe he wasn't saying that while he was running for president. Maybe he was going with the humble position, but the whole time he was planning to go to war somewhere.
Or if not him, then the people that were under him, right?
Yeah, and
somewhere.
And
right?
so for the past 6 or 7 years since that Georgia incident, there's been this thing that you occasionally pick up in drifts on American news where they're talking about Russia doing bad things and being obstinate, and it kind of like it seems like it's been ratcheting over the past couple years. It almost seems like there was this time at which nobody was saying anything, and now it's like there's a clear intention that someone wants to start trouble with Russia.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they definitely. I mean, okay. So again, one of her planks is that America has to lead the world.
Yeah.
And Russia is an obstacle to that.
Yeah, that's
right?
one of the reasons I kind of.
And the funny thing about it, honestly, is that the positions now that we have compared to the Cold War are almost exactly reversed. America has shifted pretty far to the left, whereas Russia has kind of shifted more rightward. I would say probably. They're going for a more traditionalist thing. They have more religious stuff. They're a little bit more reactionary than as opposed to the Cold War where America was the quote unquote freedom leader and Russia was the totalitarian communist whatever. But yeah, I mean, the US government wants to have a clear foe because that it's one of those things that it's probably also partly kind of like a like wishful thinking on the terms of like the warmongers who are currently in government. It's like fourth generation warfare is difficult for a state to deal with, right? We have a bunch of people who are not in uniform, who use guns, bombs, trucks, whatever they can get their hands on to commit mass murder in various places whenever they can. They don't have any allegiances, any outward allegiances to anyone. They don't have name, rank, and serial number, right?
Right.
They don't follow the Geneva Conventions. A government is, dealing with that kind of fourth generation warfare is very difficult for a state that is used to dealing with second and third generation warfare. And it would make it a lot easier for the warmongers if we had a nice third generation enemy, and that way we could focus our attention to them and those that they support. It would galvanize things, which is what a government wants to do. They want to get rid of the little details and just deal with things on a big sweeping level. That's what massive federalization of the education system is about, right? They They instead of letting each state come up with its own standards, they impose from above, federal standards.
Yes.
It's the same mechanism. They can't. They don't know how to deal with the fact that the information economy is making it extremely useless for people to go. I mean, look, if you're in a manufacturing economy, then a Prussian-style education system works pretty well, because most of the people that come out of that are going to be factory drones. Not, that's what they're going to do. But it would be, but in the modern information age, it makes a lot more sense for people to be free thinkers and entrepreneurial. Therefore, the Prussian education system is completely useless in the modern economy. The things that you need to know to produce, the things that you need to know and learn to produce a valuable startup business would take less than a year to learn in given 8 hours a day of your time, 5 days a week.
If that, I mean,
if that.
I've read a couple of business books, and most of them, they repeat the same kind of information, and it's it's not the most technical that it gets is when they're talking about how you have to deal with taxes and things.
Well, that's yes, but that's also due to government.
Yeah.
So that's not a if the government makes it harder for you to do things for the government, then whatever, maybe it's a wash. I don't know, but it's definitely not evidence that I mean, my point is that if there were a private education system, then there would be schools in Kansas that focus on modern agriculture, and there would be schools in Chicago that focus on starting a successful tech business. You see what I mean? But because the federal government imposes all of these standards from above, the Chicago kid learns if it worked the way it was supposed to, the Chicago kid learns the same things that the Kansas kid learns. And in order to give them both something that people think is useful education, what they get is nothing, right? They people leave K through 12 with no useful knowledge whatsoever at this point. They can do, unless they have shown their own initiative and learned things on their own, they can do no job in America, pretty much. They can mow lawns, but
and that's only because they had to mow them as kids.
Maybe, and but you're right. I mean, they don't even make you mow lawns in school. If you do that, it's because your parents make you do it, right?
Yeah.
Or because you start your own business as a kid. People do that too. I mean, it's all this. The problem with top-down thinking applies to education just as it does to warfare. And when you're stuck in a top-down paradigm, going up against a very bottom-up paradigm, you have disadvantages. You have advantages too, right? I mean, hypothetically, if the American population had the callousness to just bomb the shit out of any country with significant Islamic population, they could eventually kill all of the people who might become terrorists. That would not be a good thing, because they would end up killing a lot of people who would never be terrorists, and they would also end up turning a lot of people who wouldn't be terrorists into terrorists in the meantime. But that would be a top-down solution. Glass the whole thing. That would be easy, right? America could do that. We have enough nukes. But dealing with tiny insurgent cells that hide among innocent populations is not something that they're good at. It requires looking at things from a bottom-up perspective, and they're not good at that because they're a government.
I don't think there's any examples that come to mind of where they have demonstrated that they can do that. There's got to be at least one, right?
They exist, but they're few and far between.
I can tell.
It's incentive structure, right? I mean, when you centralize something, it is incentivized to become more. It is incentivized to become more top-down. When you decentralize something, things start to work better from a bottom-up perspective. But if you have, I mean, there are plenty of bureaucrats who have good intentions. The problem is, that they can't enact those intentions because they have a rule book that they have to follow and procedures, right? And this is something that Mises discussed in his book, Bureaucracy. That the only way to run a deeply centralized system is from the top down. You can't have a coherent system that holds together without a top-down command structure. If the whole thing is from bottom up, then everything, then there's no strong imposed reason for things to hold together. And if the people at the top want X to hold together with Y, then they have to give them orders to do that.
What was our point again?
Our point is that the problems of government extend to warfare in the same way that they extend to education.
I kind of lost track of that because, you mean to say that they started a war they started attacking these terrorists, thinking that they were going to have one situation, and now they don't know what to do because they've got this other situation.
Well, the point is that they're trying to treat the terrorist insurgencies like a third-generation warfare situation, when in reality, what that's doing is breeding more terrorists. It's the wrong response. And the reason that they have the wrong response is because of their organizational structure. Their organizational structure is conducive to dealing with top-down threats.
No, I get
it's not
that.
conducive to dealing with bottom-up threats.
I just hadn't thought of it from the perspective of why they decided to tackle it that way. To me, it was just like they want a war and they don't care about the fact that they can't actually win this war.
No, there's probably a certain strain of them that don't want to win the war. They want the war to continue forever. There are I'm sure there are power mad people in government that want an eternal state of emergency. Those people, I mean, in the same way that Hayek said that the garbage floats to the top in government, there's probably a lot of top government officials that have truly despicable motivations.
Well, don't you worry about that, because Barack Obama is almost at the end of his presidency, and he said he was going to get us out of all of this. So,
if he actually,
the one thing that he said that he had the actual authority to do.
Yeah, I know.
The one thing that he said he would do that he could have done from his first day in office, but he's been saving it because he knew that things would get so bad that we would need hope.
Is it his trump card?
That, my friend, is the most clever thing that I have heard all day.
I don't know. I mean, there's certainly elements of the government that want to win the war, but they can't because of the top-down organization,
which is so strange because
and the thing is that they're the problem. Another problem is that the people that want the war to end are probably being actively hampered by the people that don't want the war to end. And things are so these things are complex enough, and people are cagey enough that it can be hard to tell which side who's on what side.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've never even been sure if the president has actually been committed to what he said or not, because maybe he is, and it's just like okay, so you're Barack Obama, you're gonna pull all the troops out of Afghanistan, and then some bigwig
the advisor says, well, you can't do that, you got to do this first, and right now the situation isn't good, so we need to increase the number of troops before we can reduce the number of troops. I get where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I was going to say someone from the Defense Department, but an advisor gives you the image of Humphrey Appleby, so that's even better.
Yeah, that works too. I mean, there's these situations are complex. It's important to remember these situations are complex, and sometimes people who have good intentions result in bad results. Bad results aren't proof of bad intentions, and good intentions aren't sufficient to produce good results.
Yeah, well, I mean, anyone that has read a bit of Mises understands that.
Anybody who's read a bit of anything understands that. I mean, I'm on a road. It's paved with good intentions. I'm not sure where it goes, but I think I've heard an adage about this at some point.
I don't know. You might run into that charging rhinoceros.
Very subtle.
It's coming the other way. Now, I'm actually legitimately worried that we're going to end up in a war with Russia. I don't know who.
No, we won't end up in a war with Russia, because a real war with Russia would devastate. Yeah, it would be about an hour and a half. No, what's going to happen, what could happen is that we will position ourselves to be adversarial to Russian interests more frequently.
We're already doing that. Part of me.
I know we're already doing
Part
that.
of me thought that immediately when I heard about a possible coup in Turkey. I was like, "What? Are we making a move on Russia here? What's going on?"
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I mean, we are dealing with heads of state, so they might just be horrible, fire-breathing, evil monsters. But it seems to me like the purpose of diplomacy is for superpowers like the U.S. and Russia to get together and decide what they're going to do, so that they don't waste a bunch of resources stepping on each other's toes. Like, okay, so right now in Syria, the U.S. and Russia are kind of at odds, right? Or at least in the recent past, they were, right? Like, Russia was doing things that kind of helped Assad, and we were doing things that kind of helped ISIS, and like, we both spent a lot of money and time and material on these things, right? But what if before any of that happened, Obama and Putin were like, they like got together at a table and like, this is what I want to get out of Syria, this is what I want to get out of Syria. And hypothetically, the purpose of diplomacy could be that instead of wasting all of that effort, time, money, people, lives, decency, etc., going against each other, both countries could have greatly reduced their involvement in the regions and both gotten what they got out of it, having spent all of the garbage, all of the stuff that they spent. Right? Like right now, we lost a bunch of stuff because of Russian interference, and Russia lost a bunch of stuff because of our interference. But if we had both done less, could we have both gained more? That's what diplomacy is for. and apparently we have we have a Secretary of State who doesn't know how to do diplomacy, who's now running for president, so that she can still not know how to do diplomacy.
Well,
and then she's hawkish, which means that her diplomacy is going to be do what we say or we bomb you, which is going to go over real well with all the other nuclear powers in the world.
Well, that was kind of my point. That's why I was saying
I know
it's legitimate worry, but it seems to me that the tendency towards bigger and bigger war has ramped up in the past couple of years in several strange ways. Like for instance, why all of a sudden did someone feel the need to pass a bill that said we could draft women? Like why is that a law now? Where did that come from? Now,
well, I mean, it's an equality thing, right? Like the left wants equality, and the right wants to punish the left for wanting equality. So the right proposes something which is equality, but goes in the wrong direction, because both sides are authoritarian.
Okay, that's that. As dark as it sounds, that's actually reassuring, because I hadn't been able to wrap my head around a reason why anyone would suddenly do that unless there was an intention to draft people in the near future.
The correct solution is to abolish the draft.
Well, of course the correct solution is to abolish the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but I mean, the point is that you're dealing with a group of authoritarians trying to punish another group of authoritarians for having opinions for taking opinions as they see it too far. Yeah, and that's all it is. It's just gamesmanship, and all of it leads us towards deeper authoritarianism.
I mean, I guess if I'm going to put a good light on that, at least it's not a build-up to a pretense for war.
How do you know that?
I don't know that. Now you've given me another way I can look at it, so a slightly better way than...
No, why would they want to expand the draft if they weren't going to use it?
That's what worried me, and now you've said it again. You gave me a moment of semi-reassurance, and then you had to go and say it.
I had to dash it.
Yeah,
it was all I had to. It was all that it had to be done.
Which isn't fair, because didn't I give you a ray of hope a minute ago? Or you were supposed to say no. I was talking about when I said we might go to war with Russia and all of this will become meaningless.
I don't know. It depends on the meaning of the word hope. If it means bullet, then yeah, I'm definitely seeing the possibility of getting a ray of hope in the near future.
You might want to check your privilege, thinking you can just redefine words in a conversation there, buddy.